Joining me now, Krystal Ball, co-host of Rising on the Hill TV, wonderful progressive, former MSNBC anchor. So a meeting of former MSNBC anchors right here on the Young Turks. Krystal, how you doing?
Hi, good. Thank you for having me on.
Of course. Thanks for coming on. Krystal, let me run through the news today with you. Let's start really broad and then narrow down. We're going to talk about impeachment, then we'll talk about Democratic candidates because there, I know you have a strong opinion, and I'm curious to hear it. So impeachment, general thoughts? Yes, no, go, forward.
My general thoughts are that the Democratic Party is already doing everything they possibly can to screw this whole thing up. I mean, there are two major blunders that I see at this point. One is to focus in exclusively on the Ukraine allegations instead of looking at the entirety of his presidency. But number two is, look, if you're going to go after this president for corruption, great, do it. But don't pretend like it's all cool and well and good that Hunter Biden was getting paid $50,000 to sit on the board of a Ukrainian energy company while his dad was vice president, or that it was cool for him to sit on, to work at a credit card issuer when his dad was senator from Delaware. You don't have to excuse that behavior. And what I already see in my interviews with members of Congress, even Elizabeth Warren got tripped up on the campaign trail on this, is people trying to excuse that ordinary, perfectly legal, but completely unacceptable level of cashing in on public service that the Bidens apparently engaged in an effort to make it just about Trump. Now, I get it. What Trump did is so much worse and illegal and awful and inexcusable, but that doesn't mean that we should turn a blind eye to the ordinary cashing in that so many Democratic politicians have done over the many years.
So, Krystal, if we were both still on cable news, this is when I would shout you down and go, "How dare you, madam? You are not allowed to talk about Joe Biden. That story has been debunked." So now the reality is, of course, you're right, and so and it's bothering me that both some progressives are viewing it as either or. Well, since Biden has issues too, we shouldn't talk about Trump or impeach him. That's the strangest thing I've ever heard. But most people, and in the mainstream, are saying, well, since what Trump did is wrong and Biden is a beloved establishment figure, we're not allowed to talk about his son. So I don't want to get into the stuff that Rudy Giuliani is doing about Hunter's personal life, and that's kooky and crazy, and that part is unacceptable. But does anyone really believe that Hunter Biden was getting paid $50,000 a month because he is a specialist on Ukrainian gas?
Yeah, so for context, I looked up the folks who sit on the board of Exxon, which is the world's largest energy company. And these are CEOs of Fortune 100 companies that sit on this board. And they were making less than Hunter Biden on the Ukrainian energy company board. So look, it's absurd. And again, there's no reason to justify it. Now look, I happen to think that because they chose to impeach him on this particular thing, it's going to be a disaster. I mean, it is so Hillary Clinton 2.0, where we try to make the case that, we're the lesser of two evils. And Trump, because he's completely unapologetic and brazen, people actually like that he puts his corruption in their face rather than running around as a moralist and acting like he's perfect and he's running on his values, as Biden is doing. And so then you end up with this lesser of two evils scenario again, and we know how it turned out last time.
Right, so that's why I agree with what you said right in the beginning. This impeachment inquiry should not be narrow, it should be broad. And so one, as a matter of strategy, why would you foreclose all other opportunities when Donald Trump seems to have committed several crimes? Number two, why would you say, hey, even though he committed campaign finance violations by paying hush money, I don't want to talk about it. That'll make it seem like Donald Trump didn't do it. That's what Donald Trump will say. So it's just, well, that strategy is so bizarre, Krystal, that it leads me to having to ask you the next question. What's going on with Nancy Pelosi and Democratic leadership? There's now a second whistleblower saying, I have evidence of Donald Trump meddling with the IRS and the audits, et cetera. And it seems like Richard Neal, the head of the House Ways and Means Committee, doesn't want to hear it. And he also didn't want Donald Trump's New York State tax returns. Why are they desperate not to investigate his business ties?
Right. I couldn't tell you, Cenk. I really couldn't. And here's the thing. There's been so much dithering around the question of impeachment. Is anyone surprised that this guy was acting illegally and trying to dig up dirt on Joe Biden? I mean, he came into office on a pledge to make good on political vendettas with lock her up. We have known from day one how corrupt this individual was. I mean, he was shilling for his golf courses on the campaign trail, right? None of this is anything new. And yet there's been so much dithering and such a failure, frankly, to make the case to the American people that he was fundamentally unfit. Now, here's the other thing that I would say and that I would argue is that when you ask regular people what they care about in terms of the destruction of this presidency, we tend to get very spun up. And I understand why. And the media gets certainly very spun up on these sort of, breaking the norms and guardrails of democracy, right? He shouldn't have said that to Jeff Sessions. He shouldn't have asked Corey Lewandowski to do that. He shouldn't have said that to the Ukrainian president. True, all of it. But what they are actually focused on is the real harm that he's done to human beings in this administration. So institutionalized cruelty at the border, kids locked in cages and permanently orphaned, by the way, in certain cases, the Muslim ban, right? I could go on and on about the real harm that this president has done. How about fostering the greatest domestic terrorist movement in the country with white nationalists and the violence that they've caused? To me, those are part of the case that should be made here if you're going to move forward with impeachment. Now, I do think it's a bit of a trap because you know how this works with the media, Cenk. As much as we want to keep talking about, should we have a wealth tax, Medicare for all, a Green New Deal, all of these things will get pushed out to focus in on this one question around Ukraine. And it will leave a lot of Americans feeling like they are not having their issues spoken to and addressed as we focus on this issue with Ukraine. So it's kind of a trap that Democrats are in right now.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's a slight disagreement or not, but it's not like Democrats were going to do that anyway. They weren't going to vote on the wealth tax or Medicare for all. They weren't going to push McConnell to do that. The Democratic leadership is opposed to Medicare for all and Green New Deal. So in that case,
Green Dream.
Yeah, Green Dream or whatever, as Nancy Pelosi calls it. It's only supported by. It's only supported.
But I would say the plans that the candidates were putting out, those were breaking through. I mean, we had, huge debates on CNN about climate change, 7 hours, town hall on CNN. Like, I never thought I would see such a thing, right? We had a wealth tax proposal come out from Warren and now from Sanders that got a lot of coverage. We've had plans around increasing unionization, dealing with income inequality. We actually have had some of that stuff breaking through from the presidential candidates. And now all of that is going to go to the wayside. And it's going to be all about this one question around Ukraine.
Yes, again, I don't know that I agree with that. It's up to the presidential candidates to insist on their policy positions. They always act like wilting flowers, like, oh golly gee, I guess there's nothing I could do about this. No, you could forcefully make your case, as obviously some progressives do, which leads me to the question of the hour, really. People are beginning to ask Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, and you guys have done some segments on Rising on that. I think you've been fairly clear, but I'm going to ask anyway. Do you think there's one candidate clearly better than the other among progressives?
I do. And there's a lot of parsing of Sanders and Warren's positions, right? Which I think is completely fair, right? We're looking at who's going to do what, et cetera, and what their track record's been. The piece in terms of policy that I think is significant is Sanders has a tendency to prefer universal solutions. So if you're talking about medical debt, you're talking about rent control, you're talking about canceling student debt, it's universal solutions. Warren tends to prefer a means-tested approach. So if you look at her child care plan, if you look at her student debt plan, et cetera, it's a means-tested approach on housing as well. Now, what we know from history is that means-tested approaches get demonized by the right as welfare, and they get politically destroyed. There's a reason why Social Security and Medicare are the most popular social welfare programs we've ever had in history and some of the most successful in the world. It's because they're universal. So they can't be demonized. You can't pit people against each other. You can't say they're for this group and not for that group. They're universal, and so they're popular. So that's one difference that I think is significant. But the part that I think is even more important is how they're going about running their campaigns and making their case and what it says about the way that they would govern. So to me, when Elizabeth Warren goes to the Democratic establishment and courts them and says, I'll be a team player, I find that very distressing. Because this is the team, frankly, that brought us NAFTA. This is the team that brought us TPP. This is the team that brought us Wall Street bailouts with no accountability. This is the team that brought us triangulation and counter scheduling, right? That's the team that you're going to be a team player on. And you know as well as I do that they're only going to let change go so far. I happen to think that the Democratic Party doesn't just need reform, it needs a hostile takeover. So, when I asked Senator Sanders in our interview, are you an existential threat to the Democratic Party? And he says, well, in a way, yes, I am. That's, to me, what we need for the scale of the problems that we face right now and the level of corruption and ineptitude that exists in the current Democratic Party. So, look, I like Elizabeth Warren. I begged Elizabeth Warren to run in 2016 instead of Hillary Clinton. I admire her greatly. I think she's tough. I think she's smart. I think she's way better than, almost any other of the candidates. But is there a difference, and does it matter? Yeah, I think there is.
Yeah. So one more question, Krystal, to go down that path. So the argument is, yes, I hear what you're saying. And by the way, just to be clear, I'm enormously sympathetic to what you're saying. But people say, well, look, Elizabeth Warren gets things done. She got the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau passed when she wasn't even a senator. And when we know for a fact the Obama administration was opposed to it, and she bent them to her will. So that is pretty stunning. And so and you mentioned a lot of the ills with the Democratic Party, the bank bailouts, TPP, et cetera, but she's been opposed to all of those things. So does her track record of getting things done impress you, and could that make a difference? Because at the end of the day, we got to pass the bills. And so if she's going to be good at strategizing to pass those bills, can that be an advantage that she has?
At the end of the day, what you need is a grassroots, multiracial, working class coalition to force the so-called leaders in Washington to do their bidding. That's the only thing that works. And so, yes, Elizabeth Warren has a deeply impressive resume, but I would also say a lot of that opposition was before she came to Washington. And when she had a choice in 2016 to stand with progressives when we had a real chance of offering a candidate who really could have beaten Donald Trump, she decided to stand with Hillary Clinton. And I think that was a real turning point. It was certainly a real turning point in my view of the way that she was operating in Washington. And again, I understand the choice. It was pragmatic. Hillary Clinton at that point, it was clear she was going to get the nomination. And Elizabeth Warren, I'm sure, thought, if I line up with her, maybe I can get into the administration, I can do good, right? I know that the motives are good there. I believe that. But it was still a choice to line up behind the neoliberal consensus that has devastated so many American communities, so many working class families, and in favor of a sort of political calculus.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that says something about the way she would govern and how far she'd be able or willing to go.
Yeah, and look, I want to clarify, she did not endorse Hillary Clinton during the primaries until Bernie Sanders had lost. But at the same time, Krystal's point is well taken, because it also goes to her theory of change. Work within the system rather than fighting the system. And so that's the decision that Democratic voters are going to have to make.
That's exactly right.
Yes, and so it's fascinating to see how it's going. It's great that we have this embarrassment of riches among progressives, choices we've never had in our lifetimes. So that's a wonderful thing overall. But there are beginning.
Can I say one thing? I just wanted to offer you some shameless flattery, which is I watched your interview before me with that candidate, and the first time I was on with you, the first time I met you was when I was a candidate. Nobody believed in me. Nobody knew who I was. Everybody thought I was this joke of a 28-year-old, which, in certain ways I was. But you gave me a chance to make the case. You've always done that. And I just want to say, it means a lot and it makes a big difference. So thank you for doing that.
Krystal, that means a lot to me. I really appreciate you saying that. We're trying to give outside voices an arena here, a platform, a way to get their voice out. And we've been doing it for a long time. We continue to do it, and we've taken a lot of flack for it. And so I appreciate you saying that. But I want everybody to check out Rising. That's Krystal's show on Hill.tv because they're doing the same thing. They're giving outside voices a chance. And obviously coming at it from a very different perspective than the mainstream media, and probably the reason why we're both not on MSNBC anymore.
It all works out, it's fine.
That's right. All right, Krystal, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Cenk. Have a good night.
You too. Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.